Hello, integrated topic students. This is Ms. Codner for today's lesson for November 29th and also for November 30th. So for today's class, you're going to need a calculator, a pen, a pencil, and also the white packet from the front desk. And the white packet is also under the handout section named Trend Lines and Line of Best Fit. So this will be the last time that we look at trend lines and how we can associate it with real world situations. So with this packet, it has four problems to it. So I did the first problem with the students, and then the last three problems the students have to do amongst themselves. So I can't really show it on the website, but I can definitely show you what I did during the class period. So let's look at the first problem. So we have Hernando kept a record of his salon sales and tips for one afternoon as shown below. Plot the data on the copy of the grid, number and label the graph appropriately, draw a trend line, use this graph to answer the answers that follow. So first things first, I took the sales amount that we have here, the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and 45, and we took the tips amount and basically plotted that information onto our graph. So for the first one is 10, 2, so I start at 10 on the x-axis and I go up 2. Then 15, 3, start at 15, go up 3, and 20, go up 2, and so on. So if you look at the points, they're all not on a straight line, but they do have a pattern to it. So as I look at it from left to right, it looks like my points are ascending. So I should have what's called a positive slope. Also, the line that I drew, it's not probably the perfect line in the world, but I tried to draw this line through majority of the points to represent my positive increase. So after we do that, we need to label our graph. So what will be the x-axis is going to be the sale amount, and what will be your y-axis is going to be your tip amount. So sales amount is going to be the x, tip amount, that'll be my y. Okay, so now that my axes are labeled, okay, I have my points, I drew my trend line, now I'm going to see if I can answer the following questions. So for part A, it says, use what you know about slope and y-intercept to write an equation for your trend line. So when we wrote equations, we can do this one of two ways. We can find the slope, which is the rise or a run, or the formula using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? Once we find our slope, then we can either use the point slope equation or that slope intercept form to find our equation. So that's doing it manually. The other way to do it is to do it with the graphing calculator. And if you notice up in this gray box here, I have the steps that you need to do in order to put it in the graphing calculator. So first you will push the stat button, which is towards the right side of your calculator, just underneath the word del. Once you hit stat, you're going to hit enter for edit. And then in your list one column, you're going to list all the numbers for the sales amount. And for your tips amount, you're going to put that in your list two. So this sales amount right here, this is representing your X, and your tip amount, that's representing your Y. So what we're doing is we're putting in our coordinates to represent those X and Y values. Once you put all your points in, so make sure you have an even amount and you have the right amount of points in there. Altogether should be 8. So you have 8 points or 8 values for your sales amount, 8 values for your tip amount. Once you have that in there, you're going to hit stat again. Then you're going to arrow over to the right once for it to calculate. And you're going to go down to number 4, which is linear regression. LinReg is short for linear regression. So linear regression, linear meaning line, In regression, it could be increasing or it could be decreasing. So once you do that, you're going to hit enter. And then you're going to be given an equation. So the equation for A, which is supposed to represent the M, aka your rate of change, aka your slope, and it said 1.357. So now let's think. We're dealing with cash values. We're dealing with money. Is there anything or any such way of having 0.1357 of dollars or cents? No. So we need to round that to our nearest hundredth position. Translation, we need to round it to the second space after the decimal point. So I have 1.3, but after that 3 is a 5. So remember, for 5 and above, you're actually going to round 1 to the previous unit. So translation, if I have 1, if I have 1.357, make this a little bit larger, okay? And notice this 5 is 5 or larger. That means I need to add a 1 to its previous unit. So instead of 1.3 or 13 cents, I'm dealing with 1.4, which is 14 cents. Okay? So you got that 1.4, that's representing my rate of change, my slope. So now, remember, for an equation of a line is y equals mx plus b. So we need our b value. Looking at our table, we don't have a 0 to represent my x values, okay? But when we did it in the calculator, it gave me a 0.392. So again, that 2, that 2 after the 9 is less than 5. So that means I do not add a 1 to my previous unit. So in this case, instead of 1.3 or 1.392, it's actually going to be a positive 0.39. Okay? So if you're not too sure about the rounding, my suggestion, look under the study skills section and use one of the websites to help you a little bit with the rounding. Okay? It's probably been a long time since you rounded, and I know the first thing you wanted to do is round it to the first decimal place. But remember, if we're dealing with change, we got to go to the second decimal places, okay? So now that's the first part. So part B has 2 questions, and you always have to pay attention to what is being asked of you on these questions. So part B states, what does the slope mean here? So first off, my slope is 0.14. But it's asking, what does it mean? Meaning, in this context, dealing with the sales amount and dealing with the tip amount. So what does that 1.4 mean? So if for every sales amount, this tip amount seems to be increasing because my sales are increasing, my tips are increasing. But how much is it increasing by? It's increasing by that 1.4. So for every sales amount, that tip amount is increasing by 1.4. Anytime you have to explain slope, you should be doing some kind of comparison of your independent variable and your dependent variable. So your independent variable is going to be the sales amount in this case, and your dependent variable is going to be the tip amount. So when you're doing slope, remember, slope is nothing but rise over run. Rate of change is the same definition of slope. And if you're dealing with rise over run, you're dealing with the change of y over the change of x. So that means you should be explaining both your x values and your y values. So that answers that first question. The second question says, does this value make sense in this context? Does that mean that every time Hernando gets $1 for his sales amount, does he always get 14 cents per dollar for his tip amount? In this case, due to the amounts, it doesn't make sense to tip someone 14 cents per dollar. Because if we looked at his sales amount of 10, I should be getting 14 cents for every dollar. So if I'm getting, so I have like 10 cents, I mean $10, and I'm supposed to be getting 14 cents for every dollar, that means I should be getting a tip of $1.40. But did he get a tip of $1.40? No, he got a tip of $2. Okay, so in this case, it doesn't make sense. So now it comes to part C. What does the y-intercept mean? So remember, y-intercept is your starting amount, is your starting point. So my y-intercept is this 0.39, aka 39 cents. So we're saying my y-intercept is when my sales amount is going to be 0 and my tip amount is 39 cents. So for part C, what does that y-intercept mean? When the sales amount is 0, the tip amount is 39 cents. Or you can say it like this. The tip amount is a starting amount, is a starting tip amount. So now the next question asks, does this value make sense in this context? So does it make sense if you did not make a sale that you get a tip of 39 cents? Hopefully you said no. So, doesn't make sense. No sale, no tip. So sometimes when you think of these things, you got to think in a realistic way. Does it make sense for me to get a tip for doing nothing? Okay? And the last part, predict Hernando's tip if his salon sale is $55. Justify your answer. So, if we're able to figure out our equation, and we're going to use that equation again. So now, I want to predict the tip. The tip is representing which letter? The y, or which variable I should say? The y or the x? So if you don't recall, let's go back. So the tip amount is representing my y. Are we looking for the tip amount, or did they give me the tip amount? Predict his tip amount. So we're looking for that tip amount. So where is this $55 going? It's going to go into the sales, the X. So now we plug that 55 in for the X, and now we just do the math. So make sure if you put it in your calculator, you're putting in 0.14 times 55 plus 0.39. Please make sure you put in your decimals. I know sometimes you get into a rush and you're going to get a funky answer, okay? But make sure you put those decimals in. So once you put the decimals in, then you do the multiplication, then you do the addition, you should get an answer of $8.09. Okay? So to go back, the tough part is, one, finding your equation. Okay? Once we found our equation, what does that slope mean? So you can think of it this way. For every, whatever your independent variable is, in this case it was the sale amount, the, whatever the dependent variable is, in this case it was the tip amount. If your slope is positive, it's increasing. If your slope is negative, it's decreasing, and then decreasing by whatever the amount. Okay? So if you go with that format, that will help you to visualize, and it'll help you to explain. So if you ever get stuck, just say for every, and then it'll start to roll off your tongue. Okay? And then there's a time that you're going to have to step back and just think realistically. Does it make sense? Yes, you're going to get an answer, but there's going to be times you're going to have to ask yourself if it makes sense, yes or no. Okay? So they had to complete the rest of the packet, which it has a problem too with Netra buying beads per pound. The other question dealt with 10 students, their semester grades. So the first semester grades is your X, and second semester grade is your Y. Okay? If you notice, most of the parts B and part C are the same type of questions. So you might want to use that first page to help you with the rest of this packet. And lastly, for number 4, the test anxiety, that's going to represent your X values. And the success on the test, that's going to represent your Y values. If you notice, the X's are pretty much increasing. So this is your test anxiety. So the more your test anxiety increases, what's actually happening to your success on tests? It's mostly decreasing. Okay? So that's kind of a hint to help you with the rest of number 4. Okay? And again, if you look at C and if you look at B, they're basically kind of matched up. And don't forget, you need to find the equation. Okay? So if you're doing it manually, if you're trying to find the equation manually, if you got 2 points that's on the line, not around it, just randomly picking it, if you drew your line through your points after you graph it, you want to pick 2 points that's on the line that you drew. Okay? And then once everything was turned in, we just completed a slight review for transferring equations from standard form to slope-intercept form. And the reason why I was doing that is to help students kind of retrace their steps of how to solve for the variable y, the letter y. And once they start doing that, we're about to start Unit 3 on systems of equations starting on December 1st and December 2nd classes. Okay? So once you're finished with the packets, you turn all those things into me. I'm going to see if I can conduct the oral presentation the next time you guys come in. And it'll just be something real quick, and I just want to ask some questions and make sure you understand the concepts before we move on. Okay? And then once we do that, and again, if you're not sure how to round, use the websites that is attached to this website, and it should help you out, okay? So I will see you guys next time.